In this conversation, Aravind Bala shares his journey from a long tenure at Microsoft to becoming the CTO of SeekOut, a recruitment technology company. He discusses his challenges faced when starting his first company, Nexito, and the eventual pivot to SeekOut, which focused on enhancing recruitment processes through technology and AI. Aravind emphasizes the importance of understanding market dynamics, the role of AI in recruitment, and the need for a cultural shift in how organizations approach hiring. He also offers valuable advice for aspiring entrepreneurs about enjoying the journey and working with the right people. Welcome to the Startup to Exit podcast, where we bring you world-class entrepreneurs and VCs to share their hard-earned success stories and secrets. This podcast has been brought to you by TIE Seattle. TIE is a global nonprofit that focuses on fostering entrepreneurship. TIE Seattle offers a range of programs including technology panels, the TIE Entrepreneur Institute, and the TIE Seattle Angel Program. We encourage you to become a TIE member so you can gain access to these programs. To become a member, visit www.seattle.tie.org.
Welcome, everyone. Today we have Aravind Bala. Aravind was formerly at Microsoft, where he was a partner engineering manager. Now he's CTO at a company called SeekOut. So welcome, Aravind.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So before we get into dive into SeekOut and your role there, tell us a little bit about your journey before starting SeekOut. And you were at Microsoft for almost 14 years, and then decided to do a startup. So what motivated you to leave Microsoft and do a startup?
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked building stuff, and I always knew I'd want to do a startup. In fact, I mean, after I joined Microsoft, after a year, I left Microsoft to join a startup. It was in the early .com 2000. Actually, not early. It was like towards the waning part of the .com days. I joined in 2000, and then of course the stock market tanked, and the company had to lay off everyone, and then I ended up back at Microsoft. Even at Microsoft, I've mostly been working on incubation teams and 0 to 1. I like the journey of doing the 0 to 1, building something from scratch. Worked on a lot of initial projects, including some of the projects where I came up with the idea and I managed to get funding at Microsoft. It was an interesting experience, funded the team, built the team, and kind of delivered and repeated that a few times. And then I figured, like actually doing it for real versus doing it inside a large company, which feels like you're doing a startup, but it's really not, because there's so many things that you don't control, and you have all these dependencies, and you can't really think about the customer, right? There's just so many differences. So for me, it was like, when the Jeff Bezos regret minimization framework made a lot of sense, which is what would I regret more, right? Not climbing the corporate ladder or not doing a startup. And for me, it was not trying. Right? Even if I'd failed, it's not a big deal. But if I did try, I would regret that more. And that was basically what made me decide. The second thing was also having a co-founder that I really want to work with and believe in. And that's Anoop. I met Anoop Gupta at Microsoft. We worked together for, I think, 2, 3 years. And, he was also open to trying something different. And that seemed like the right time to do it together.
That's great. So when you initially started off, the company was called Nextio, as I understand.
Yes.
And it was a different concept. So tell us more about what Nextio was and what your journey was like before you pivoted into SeekOut.
Yeah. So, we had a little bit of an unconventional startup journey in the sense that we actually quit first and then we decided to do a startup. We didn't have any idea for what that startup would do. We decided to, and partly because it's really hard to come up with a good startup idea while trying to work full time. You can't really do justice to your job and to the idea or work hard enough for it. So so we decided we just cut the cord, just jump off the plane, whatever. And now, like now you're all in. And so then we brainstorm a lot of different ideas. And the idea for next year was to build a two-sided marketplace where you could meet people you don't know. And so what's happening in today's world is everybody wants to reach you, right? And especially if you're in a position of importance, then you get bombarded by all of these cold messages, emails, and phone calls, and all of that kind of stuff. Some of them are important, a lot of them aren't, right? And the problem is that there is no cost to reaching you. It costs zero for somebody to send you an email, and which is an interruption for you. So the idea of next year was, how can we add signal to that? And the way we thought of adding signal was using money. If somebody is willing to put some amount of money at risk, saying, I bet that this thing is going to be of interest to you, I'd like you to take it, then that gives you signal to decide if, hey, this is interesting or not. So that was the idea. Um, it's a two-sided marketplace. It would have worked if we had enough people on either side. But the problem was always going to be about, how do we bootstrap it, right? And how do when you build a two-sided marketplace, it's like, how do you build one side of the market so that the other side comes in? How do you have virality because it's a consumer product, and so on? So we knew all the problems. We spent a lot of time trying to understand all of that stuff, like what builds virality and what's the viral coefficient and all of that kind of stuff. What we found was that consumer ideas is a little bit of like a crapshoot. Like, sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't. You don't really learn that much. Like, if it works for you once, doesn't mean it will work again. There were a lot of unique circumstances in every consumer app that became big. They broke the rules, and at a time when it was okay to break the rules, and then got away with it. Just like LinkedIn spamming the address book and sending 2,000 things, or WhatsApp downloading your entire contact database and then spamming everyone. All of them grew because they had some unique leverage, which is kind of a time-bound thing. One thing I've learned is that whenever you read something in a book, don't try it. It's already too late. Each one of them has some kind of growth hack, and the trick for us was, could we find such a growth hack? And we tried a lot of stuff, and then we had a decision point after we raised money and so on. The decision point for us was, we had about 6 months of money left. The question was, did we have a plan that would allow us to get to the next round? Or should we try something else with the 6 months of money that we had left? And again, the problem with the consumer idea is, it's not predictable. Maybe we could have worked it out, maybe we could. It's hard to predict whether an idea will succeed. You just have to try. And that's, I think, part of the reason why a lot of the consumer um, apps are like, these fresh out of college folks. There's no correlation between the founder and the success of the app. And in fact, one VC told us that the most dangerous founder is a consumer founder who has made it big the last time, because they didn't attribute it to skill. They think they have some skill, which is not true. So that was our decision point, where do we continue or do we pivot? And we decided to pivot.
So tell us more about the journey about pivoting to SeekOut. Was it in any way related to next year, or was it just a completely
So one of the ideas we had when we built Nextio was, we built this thing called Career Compass, which was a way for people to understand their career opportunities, right? Like, if you are a software engineer at Microsoft, what are your career options? What do people usually do? What are some non-traditional options? It's kind of to help you plan your career. And we were thinking of using that as a way to drive interest, because, like, the problem with a network or messaging network, something like that, is you need to figure out a value proposition for the first person to join, even if there is nobody else on the network. And, this was one of the things we were trying. And, we got good feedback on it, but it was clear that it wasn't like, it was kind of like a mildly interesting thing. It wasn't something that was going to get us virality. On the other hand, we showed to a bunch of recruiters who were on the other side of the marketplace. What they said was, hey, this is really interesting, but I'd rather, if you can help me find people, it's the same kind of concept, that would be more interesting. So for us, it was a little bit of like, okay, like, we have built all of this technology. What if you work backwards, right? And we need to survive in 6 months. This is how much money we had. This is how much of a product we could build, and this is how much time we had to sell the product. So what could we build in 1 month that would actually allow us to get signal and survive, right? And that was kind of how we backed into SeekOut in a way. A lot of times, you just have to get into the space to really understand all the details. It's very hard to, sit on the outside and try and figure it out. But this was a space we knew we could figure it out, because one of the advantages in B2B is that you can actually, I'd say it's kind of like debuggable. You can figure out if you listen to customers and you see what they do, you can kind of figure out what the value prop is.
Right. Right.
And so that's how we got started, seek out and got into this space.
So the recruiting space is a crowded space. Tell us more about what SeekOut does and what is your unique selling proposition.
Yeah. So in recruiting, there are many, many different sub-markets from like ATSs to CRMs to marketing to hiring for volume roles to white collar hiring and so on. So the thing that we picked was white collar hiring. And the biggest player in the space is LinkedIn, which it's a massive business. But there were some unique opportunities that we felt where we could address that LinkedIn wouldn't address because they had both sides of the marketplace. And for them, it's always members first. If there is any if they had to make a trade-off between member experience and recruiter experience, they would make the trade-off for the member experience, which meant that there was an opportunity for us if we just thought of the recruiter experience. So we built a bunch of features that not that LinkedIn can't build, but LinkedIn wouldn't build for those reasons. And that helped become a differentiator. So the two big things, one was just tech hiring and combining it with other sources of data that recruiters find very valuable. Like, for example, looking at people's code contributions or the papers or patterns or something like that. And LinkedIn has made the decision to just stick with what the user has said about themselves. They don't make any inferences because, if they get it wrong, they own the relationship with the user, and that could be, that's a problem.
Right.
But
Right.
recruiters don't care so much if you get it slightly wrong, right? Matters is on the whole, are they able to find the people they want? So one opportunity was in going beyond LinkedIn, finding people more wholesome profiles on tech and so on. The second thing was diversity. When it was when it was a big deal to actually find diverse talent was a huge differentiator for us. So that when we grew, it was mostly on the basis of these two things. It was tech hiring and diversity.
And you got the additional information out of GitHub. How did you primarily get
Yeah,
the
it was GitHub,
tech?
papers and patterns, public profiles, and a lot of the diversity is just inferences, right? Like given all the data we have, can we build a classifier that will infer if you're African American or Asian or Hispanic or racial diversity as well as gender diversity.
Right,
A
right.
lot of gender diversity you can just tell from the name, right?
Right.
Like when you hear a name like Shirish, it's pretty obvious. It's a male and from India, right? Like this is not a whole lot more information.
Actually, my name is can be both male and female, by the way.
Okay. But in both cases, it's not hard to make such inferences. You don't need
Yeah,
very
right,
complicated logic.
right,
But to do
right.
that at scale with hundreds of millions of names is hard. People
Right.
on LinkedIn, people used to just come up with lists of names. So, if they wanted to hire women, they would pick the top 20 most common female names and put that in a search string. As you can guess, that's like highly biased. You're never going to get any diversity. You're going to get the most common names and so on. So us being able to offer a solution to do that at scale, I think was at that time.
Right. Okay. So you hit product market fit fairly quickly, I assume. I think you started
Yes.
growing very rapidly, and you raised over $100 million round based on your growth and so forth. And then the tech hiring freeze set in.
Yeah.
Did that affect you significantly, and how did you react?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going on, I would say. I
Yeah.
think the freeze is still going on for various reasons. It was either, like obviously the free money with COVID and cutting down and the focus on profitability and no longer growth at all costs. That obviously meant the hiring market went down substantially. The second thing is that when you sell tools to recruiters, you're kind of dependent on the total recruiter headcount. And that dropped dramatically. Like when people made layoffs, the layoffs disproportionately impacted talent acquisition. That's the first thing that goes, right? So maybe 10% layoff, but they could be like a 50% layoff on talent acquisition.
Right.
It's obviously affected everyone in this space. And the second thing for us was also diversity. As you can tell now, it's not a topic. Companies are not really going out of their way to That's, so that also meant that, that affected our USP and ability to sell and so on. So I don't think we have the answer figured out completely yet. And that's part of what we are trying to do, is to reinvent on figuring out, product market fit is a function of product and market, right? Yeah. When market changes, you have to change your product. Yeah. The market has changed significantly for hiring, just in terms of the many things. One is just the decrease in the number of recruiters. The second thing is, if you look at, we are basically selling a passive talent recruitment solution, which is, you go out and reach out to people who you think are a good fit. But with the layoffs and everything else, actually the job market switches in that, you can just put out a job and you get 1,000 applicants on day one. So you don't have to do a lot of work because the applicants are coming to you, in which case, you're less likely to invest in a passive talent sourcing solution because you're like, okay, I can just put out a job, I get 1,000 applicants, let's look at that. So that change, diversity change, with the rise of AI, what does it mean? What does it mean for jobs? So it's just a period of a lot of change. But whenever you have change like that, there's also an opportunity, right? Everything. Yeah. And so that's how we are approaching it, is to look at AI and try to capture the opportunity that has arisen because of this.
So now you're also looking at talent management within an organization as well. That's kind of part of your strategy.
We are now just focusing because one of the things we realize is this whole AI agents is such a big opportunity that we just need to double down and focus on that. And part of our thing is also like, how can we cut out everything else and narrow the focus and just really double down on what we think the future is going to be.
Right. Got it. Okay.
At least it's pretty clear to us what the future is going to be.
All right, let me turn it over to Gauri to continue the discussion, especially understanding what your AI strategy is.
Yeah.
So Arvind, the reason Shirish and I have partnered on the podcast is both our names are dual gender. Shirish and Gauri. So that's why we are partnered. No kidding. Hey, thanks a lot. You and Anoop have built and pivoted once, as you just narrated in your story. So AI affected everybody, including you. So now the first question I have is, are you guys approaching it with agents? Are you using agents to replicate recruiters? I mean, what is the overall strategy that you're going to the market with as a product?
Yeah. So agents is a very overloaded word. It kind of becomes like the .NET of the old times for those of us who've grown through that. Like everything is an agent. Everybody has agents. What agent? Who knows? Right? But everybody has agents. The way we think about it is, are you delivering outcomes or are you helping with productivity? Right. And I think if you can have agents that help you with productivity, which is what, like I would say 90% of all agents are in that category. We think of agents as helping you deliver outcomes. What I mean by that is, when you look at blue collar work, so initially everything was handcrafted, right? Everything that people made, like you made chairs, it was made one at a time by some craftsman. The first thing that happened was you gave the craftsmen tools. You gave them power tools, they had a drill and so on, and suddenly they could produce like 50% faster. But if you want the 10x, 100x productivity, you have to build it in a factory. And how you build it in a factory is very different from how you build one-off things at home. So today, I see the same thing happening with white collar work. Today, white collar work is based on the skill level of the person. So you're building a car, right? Like if it was totally handcrafted, that's the problem you see with all these handcrafted cars. Like one door looks amazing, the other door looks like something is off because craftsman one was great and craftsman two was not. Right. And if you're building it in a factory, you can't have that. You can't have like, one wheel looking good and one wheel looking bad. When you start doing it in a factory, it all becomes about Six Sigma and, defect minimization and maximizing the quality, which means that you should be able to hire any new factory worker and with limited training, they should be able to produce the same amount of quality. And that's not where we are with white collar work, right? Like you can't hire, like today, you just can't hire a random recruiter, put them and give them the tools and expect to have the same quality. A lot of it is based on their skill level, their willingness, and so on. You can give them tools. If you give them tools, outcomes are still dependent on them, right? Do they use the tools? Do they know how to use it correctly? Do they actually learn how to do it, and so on? But if you want the 10x productivity, and it's basically, think of it as like, what does it mean for white collar work to move to a factory where you can get 10x productivity? It's a different skill set because, like, for example, when you have people who are doing the job, right, and everybody has faced this, the first time you become a manager, it's actually a, a skill set difference. You don't start doing on the job yourself. When your employee makes a mistake, you don't take over and you say, hey, I can do this better than you. I'm going to do this, right? You have to learn how to give up control. Sometimes people, they may not do things in a way that you don't completely believe in, but that's okay. You teach them how to do it right, but you also have to give up control. It's the same kind of thing when you bring in AI. Today, if it is just a tool, then you're still in charge. The quality is based on your skill level. If you want to move it to an autonomous model, which is more like running it in a factory, you have to learn how to give up control. It's a cultural shift. It's actually a lot of change management. When we sell SaaS software, we have so much trouble getting people to adopt it. We find that, like in the same company, one person is having great results with it, another person is not having results with it. Depends on their attitude, their skill level, how they approach it, and so on. But as I said, if you want to move it to a factory, you can't have all of those differences. Everybody has to operate it a particular way and they have to give up a lot of control. And that's not easy, right? Like when you talk about AI agents, do you trust your AI agents to start messaging your most important customers with a message? Do you want to review every single message that goes through? If you want to review and edit every single message that goes through, you're getting 20% productivity increase. If you can run the pipeline and you can trust it, then you can get 10x. And so that's basically what we think of with moving to an agentic world. Is how can we move it so that instead of recruiters doing the work, recruiters are managers of agents, which means that they actually don't have a lot of control over what happens. They set the high level direction, but you have to trust that the system will do all the right things. And we actually don't want them to peek in too much and, try to customize every single thing. Like, just like you wouldn't want your technician to be able to decide what goes into every car, right? Like some technician says, oh, I want this to be here. And somebody else says, I want that. That doesn't work. Everybody has to do it exactly the same way. You need to give up control. And I think that's the big shift for us is, can we get the 10x productivity increase? How can we build this agentic workflow where humans are supervisors, but they also have to give up a lot of control? And that's very hard to do when you're selling tools. When you sell tools, you have no control over how it's going to get used. But if you're making a factory, you actually train people, right? Like you don't sell your factory to other people. Like, you basically just sell them the output. You hire people and you train them to work in this factory environment and that sort of thing. So that's essentially the model that we are moving to.
Right.
Sorry, long-winded answer.
So you introduced this nuance, right, between productivity and outcome. There's this confusion as AI floods every day, everybody debating whether it's replacing humans or not replacing humans, etc. But some clearly enhance productivity, right? Which are most of the tools I would say today are enhancing productivity. Me writing a better email is productivity enhancement. I can't. It's not writing all the answers yet. At least I'm not giving up that control that you talked about. But when you start looking at outcomes, that means you are changing workflows. If there was a particular workflow, your tools originally says, "Hey, I'll increase productivity, decrease productivity, etc." But now you're saying, I will completely change workflows." When it comes to your particular application within the enterprise workflow, it has so far traditionally been untouched by technology. It has been maybe it's gone from paper to all digital, but it's primarily untouched. They decide they're going to hire, advertise. A whole bunch of people come in. Some cleansing is happening, and then it falls through, and then a hire is made. What have you guys thought of as to how you would differentiate between the productivity and the outcome? Because the outcome is they can hire faster, cheaper, at the right person, right? But the productivity increases. If I got 1,000 applications, I can go through it all in 1 hour instead of one day or 2 days or whatever, right? So How are you guys approaching this with your enterprise customers?
Yeah, I mean, different customers are at different parts of the journey, which is why we sell a SaaS tool for people who want to do it on their own, right? They want AI to help them. And on the other hand, there are people who just care about the outcomes, right? And eventually we want to get to a point where, it's kind of like the shift from on-prem to cloud, right? Before you used to buy all your computers, you put them on-prem in your server farm, and you had to overbuy your computers because, in holiday season, you'd get 3x the traffic. The rest of the year, your computers would sit idle. It's the same kind of thing with hiring. Your hiring tends to be cyclic, right? It's like sometimes you have a lot of positions, sometimes you don't have a lot of positions. People can go from 5,000 positions to having a bad quarter announcing a hiring freeze, and then it's like zero positions. But what do you do with all the recruiters you've hired, right? Sometimes it's impossible to match the supply with the demand. Sometimes like you want to start a new division, you're like, okay, I want 100. You want all 100 heads hired at the same time, but you have 5 recruiters and they tell you, hey, prioritize, tell me which 10 roles you want to hire. That's the only thing I can do today. The rest of you have to wait. And that's a loss to your business. On the other hand, you have the opposite problem, which is you have 10 recruiters and suddenly you have 0 roles. And now, you're stuck. Like, what do I do? I have to keep these people busy. I don't really have anything. What you really want is the equivalent of going to the cloud, which is, you want on demand capacity. If I want to hire 100 roles, I want to hire all 100 at the same time. If I want to have 0 roles, I don't want to pay for anything, right? So I think what we want to, it's the same kind of thing. It's like when white collar moves to the cloud, the services part of it, people should have on demand ability. I just want the job done. Like I want 50 versions of the job done. I pay more, I pay for that if I have zero. And if we can get it done with AI at a cheaper cost than what it would cost you to hire your own recruiters, then why wouldn't it make sense? Of course, today I think cloud is probably more expensive than on-prem, but for a lot of startups, it's actually a lot cheaper, right? Buying servers actually has a huge fixed cost, whereas, it's a lot cheaper to do it on the cloud. That's the I think eventually the model will go that way. And that's what we're kind of betting on.
So as a startup, you guys had unique view into proprietary data, right? Because of the approach you took to get here, right? So are you guys built on? Are you still using LLMs? Are you built on top of LLMs, or are you guys augmenting it? What's your architecture, technically speaking?
I mean, at a high level, we use LLMs basically to solve specific tasks. And it's usually some combination of general reasoning, reading comprehension, that sort of thing. Every generation, from everything we've seen, fine tuning is just a complete waste of time because by the time you complete it, the next model comes out and it's actually a lot better. And the second thing is the economics, where I've seen it being useful is in cost, right? Like you can get a fine tuned, smaller model that's a lot cheaper. But cost isn't a huge issue for us at this point because the value is quite high, right? So you can afford to spend a lot of money on doing the job for one. The other, this is one of the big reasons with tools, right? So today, right, we sell a SaaS license, and a SaaS license is all you can eat. Like you can use it as much as you want. In the agentic stuff, it actually costs us something like $500 to do a single search because of the amount of AI we use and things like that. We would go bankrupt very quickly if we gave unlimited. People can do thousands of searches. Agentic search is like $500 a search. Regular search is like a few cents a search. So the economics just don't work out. So when you sell tools, you can't really use a whole lot of AI. You have to make the economics work, especially if you're selling seat-based pricing and you can get all you want and so on. So I think that's also one big difference.
Right. So so are you guys using any one LLM over the other, open source versus closed? Any has there been preferences by you as a technical team?
Yeah, so the way we think about it is we have different tasks, right? So the question is some tasks require world knowledge, some tasks require advanced reasoning, some tasks require long context windows, some tasks require image generation, so on. So we pair, like each of our agents defines itself as, hey, this is the capability that I need. And then we decide which is the best model today that will work for that. Like we also have scenario like we're looking for something that's cheap and fast, right?
Uh,
So when we just want to do something pretty quickly and then we further refine it later,
uh,
but it's really about time, latency, and cost. And so we use, like for example, we might use GPT-4o Mini for that, right?
uh,
But yeah, we separate out the use case from the model, and then as new models come out, we can evaluate them and see if we want to replace one of the models. And we also have like use cases like web search, so we use Perplexity for that, or mostly today we've been using Claude, OpenAI, and Perplexity. But I think we'll also probably start looking at Gemini.
got it. So you brought up two parts to it, right? One, there's the cost of you using LLM. There's open source, closed source. So I'm assuming you're saying there's a mix in using it. And then on the other hand, you also touched upon the cost has led to a change in the business model, all you can eat to limited uses, etc. Right? So do you see emerging where going back to your earlier, some would like to use tools and control, some would like outcome. Are there now two? Because one is like you're a managed service provider. Okay, give me the outcome, I'm done with it. Other is, you know what, let me be good at it, right? So is there any emergence of one model over the other among your enterprise? Because I'm assuming you have a varied set of enterprise customers who all have varying levels of resources deployed to.
I think the kind of agent model is super new. Everybody is still in the tools world, so it's part of what we are trying to sell and trying to get them on board and get them comfortable with. So I think most of the world is still in the tools thing. The one thing I'll say about outcomes versus tools is outcomes today are driven by people, the reasoning and all that stuff. If you didn't have AI, you would use people to do it. Read this email, see if this person is a good fit, read their resume,
Mhm,
decide if there's somebody you want to reach out to.
mhm,
So in that world, you're competing against human salaries. So you can afford to spend a lot more money on AI because you are competing with human salaries.
mhm,
On the tool side, you're competing with other tools. So,
mhm,
your margins are much, much lower,
mhm.
right? The question is, how much of human labor are you going to replace? And how much, that's basically the outcome part. It's like, how much, like if humans don't have to spend time on it and you're paying them $80 an hour, like there's a lot more money to be had, which is why I think the outcomes based world is like much bigger, right? It's like the recruiting tools business for sourcing is like 6 billion. The sourcing industry is like 150 billion because salaries are so much higher. People will spend maybe 10% of a person's salary on tools, right? So if you're selling tools, you're capped by that much. Nobody's going to pay, nobody's going to buy a $50,000 tool when they're paying somebody $50,000 salary, right? For you to increase the cost, you just have to say, okay, now you don't need this person. If AI can do it, you can charge more. If you can do some of the stuff that humans would.
So let me shift to another topic, right? Recently in the news, there was a Columbia University student who used the AI
Yeah.
agent to beat the interview cycles of at least the big tech companies, right? And the big tech companies were up in arms, and well, there was some dust up about it. At the end of the day, these tools are going to get used, right? So how do you see hiring changing? How do you see humans using it? I mean, this is a very clear example where a human used it for what it was meant to be, but people didn't want them to use it because that's not what they wanted out of it. So it's a unique situation, but it seems like it's in your wheelhouse, both SeekOut and you.
Yeah, this is always a cat and mouse game, right? Like you can come up with detection techniques, people will come up with better ways to evade it, and so on. I think the only way is at some point you have to bring in the person and fly them in and meet them face to face and give them a problem on the whiteboard. Anything before that point, you think they may have it. Maybe it's the right person, maybe it's the wrong person, maybe it's an AI fake, like who knows? All of those things, maybe they're cheating, they have like, there's no way for you to know for sure unless you do that. And I think there are varying business models, right? One is like people just misrepresenting themselves to get a job. But I've heard of all these stories of, like hackers from North Korea and so on. They basically get on the company payroll. It takes you like a month or two to figure out that
Nobody's there.
the right person. You pay them the salary for 2 months. They take the 2 month salary, they disappear. Maybe they get access to your network. Maybe they steal stuff. There's a lot of downside risk.
Uh-huh.
There's really no way to tell if if you just do a search on Google for AI interviewing thing, you see all of these companies that promise you VC funded companies that promise that you won't get caught, right? They're like, okay, we will overlay the cheating window on top of your window, but it won't be shown in Zoom. And then, even it actually moves with your eyesight so that it doesn't look like you're looking elsewhere, and it's semi-transparent window. There's a lot of stuff that people are building, being super creative and helping people cheat. So I'd say eventually, you just have to, at some point, you just have to, like, at least for high stakes stuff, you gotta do it in person.
So, Arvind, so you have been a mentor to our young entrepreneurs in Seattle, with TIE Seattle, right? And you yourself are an entrepreneur. And your team that you mentored last year won the global championship. What did you see? Because they're growing up in a different era than you grew up. Do you see them using tools differently? And how do you see them as entrepreneurs? And what was your experience with it?
I mean, I was definitely surprised that there were quite a few kids who were very interested and wanted to make this. They were truly interested in doing this, and they did a great job. I think the AI thing still, I think some kids are doing it. Most people, like, they use ChatGPT and that's it, right? It's not of course, they use it for their assignments or to cheat in school and, those kinds of things. It's pretty clear. But it's going to be there's all this there's like people who say, oh, everything is going to be vibe coded, and then there are people who actually tried it and said, okay, all you can you just get like 10,000 lines of code, of spaghetti code, that you don't know what to do with it. So I think for now, if you know what you're doing, it's definitely super, super valuable. It can increase your productivity quite a bit. It's not clear to me that if you don't know what you're doing, that you will actually have a lot of success. Just use the AI to. But it's going to be interesting. I think a lot of jobs will be completely automated.
Yeah.
I don't know if software engineering is going to be one of those, but a lot of jobs are going down that way.
Yeah. So Shirish, over to you to wrap up with Arvind.
Yeah, so it's fascinating, your introduction of the agentic tools, and it's still pretty early in that adoption cycle. But what's your hypothesis? Do you think your agentic tools will get widespread adoption?
Yes, I think so, because it can actually do a much better job than humans. The quality is just much higher because for a lot of jobs, they're like boring jobs. Like, people
Testing.
don't want to do it, right? And they get bored. They can do it for 5 minutes, but nobody can do it for 20 hours, right? Some of the things that, like, we do with our agentic AI, it is the equivalent of spending like 50 hours of human effort on just reading resumes. Even if you could, you can't hire somebody who's going to spend 50 hours looking at resumes constantly,
Yeah.
right? So the quality that you can get is just so much higher, right? It doesn't make sense to hire humans to do a bunch of these things. So I think if you take the value prop, you can get higher quality, obviously speed, because AI doesn't sleep and so on. So that's an easy one. And then lower costs, right? When you combine all three, the question is, why would you not do it?
Right.
I
So
think
can you
fall into the category.
so can you use the LLMs today to given a job description to tell between two different resumes which resume is better fit for the job description?
We break that thing into like 10 other steps, and then we can reliably solve each step. Because it comes back to the Six Sigma model. You don't want hallucinations. You don't want, like, LLM1 says A and LLM B says something else. What you want to do is, like, you want to break it into it's just like in a factory, right? Like, it's a pipeline, and at every step there's quality control. It's like, okay, you do this step and then the part comes out right, then you go on to the next step and so on. And if you want to deliver outcomes, you need to have quality control at every step, right? And big, uh, that's a big place where a lot of the tools break down, which is, like, a lot of our competitors, they have agentic stuff to, take a query and then find people. It's like, tell me people who are skilled in Java, who live in San Francisco with 5 years experience, and then it does something. The problem is, if you haven't talked to the hiring manager and you don't really understand what the job is, everything else after that is a waste of time. If you don't understand what the hiring manager wants, and you got that wrong, then no amount of agentic stuff is going to save you. Or don't know how to write good emails, or if your emails go to spam and you haven't monitored that, it's a waste of time. There's so many failure points that to deliver outcomes, you have to solve for all of those failure points.
Right.
So I think that goes back to the, like doing it in a factory means that you take the task, you decompose it into smaller pieces. Can you do each part with extremely high reliability? And can you have quality control at every step such that when you run the entire pipeline, you can get the same.
So do you have to train the LLMs further, even though you're breaking it up into multiple tasks? Do you have to actually train the LLMs to say, at the end of the day, this resume is a better fit for this job description, and therefore, you can apply the same logic for other resumes and other job descriptions?
I mean, basically, the first thing you have to do is to define what does better mean,
Yeah.
right? Define it in a very, very clear, unambiguous way. It's just like, if you gave 100 resumes and you had 10 people, and then you divided into bundles of 10, you give each person 10 resumes and you say, hey, come back with the best people. If you don't give them a rubric of how to score it, when
Sure.
everybody comes back, everybody will have their own scale and you won't be able to put it together. So the first
Right.
task is, what is the unified rubric such that anybody who picks it up will come to the same conclusion? So that is
Conclusion,
part of it. And once you have it, then you can do it. And to the point about the LLM, it's about matching the capability of the LLM to the task, right? Certain tasks are simple enough. You don't need a, super complex LLM. Certain tasks are like, for example, what we found is certain tasks like taking a Zoom meeting and extracting all the right stuff. Like, most LLMs fail. Like you need the absolute, like Pro or O3 high to have any shot of doing a good job of it, right? So it's about matching the capabilities of the LLM to the
LLMs, right.
complexity of the task.
Right.
And
And
most
then,
jobs aren't that complex, right? Like most people don't, nobody's doing like math Olympiad level problems on a regular basis. Most people
Sure.
are copying cells in Excel. Most of that can be done by a pretty cheap LLM.
Right. Now, with regards to the pricing model, you say that the agentic software is really replacing individuals, and therefore you can charge a lot higher. How much can you? What if a recruiter costs $60,000? What percentage of that cost are you pricing yourself at? Is it at 50%, 25%, 100%?
Yeah, so the nice thing in recruiting is there exists an outsourced recruiting model, right? If you hire an agency, they charge you like 25 to 30% of the person's first year salary. That's an existing model. So that's an easy model that we can play with. We can say, hey,
I
with
see.
AI agents, we charge you maybe half of that or something, right? So that is
Right.
one model. For the enterprise, it's something we have to figure out. But at a high level, the way you've got to think about it is, at the end of the day, you're paying for outcomes, right? Like you have a recruiting team, and that recruiting team has a total cost of X, and that team delivered so many hires. So you can do the math and say, okay, it's costing me approximately X per hire. Question is, can you get better results at paying less than X per hire, and you can get it faster? So that's, I think, so that's basically your pricing model.
Right. Cool. I guess one final question related to your journey as an entrepreneur. If you had to give one piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, what would that be?
I think things take a lot longer than you expect, right? So a big part of it is make sure you're happy with the journey and with the people that you work with. That's the only thing you can guarantee.
Yeah.
The outcomes are unknown. You don't know if it'll happen, when it'll happen, none of that stuff. There's so many variables that go into it.
Sure.
Make sure that you enjoy the journey and you are with the people that you want to work with.
That's
And it
great
takes a
advice.
lot longer than you think.
Right. That's great advice. All right, Arvind, thanks so much for spending your time. And thanks also for volunteering your precious time to work with the TYE students and guiding them. And hopefully you continue to be involved with TIE in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Shirish, and thank you, Gauri. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast from Startup to Exit, brought to you by TIE Seattle. Assisting in production today are Isha Jain and Mini Verma. Please subscribe to our podcast and rate our podcast wherever you listen to them. Hope you enjoyed it.